This Hobo Johnson album is not good. California rapper, singer, and songwriter, screamer, poet, sayer of things, Mr. Hobo Johnson, returning with a new record after the release of 2019's The Fall of Hobo Johnson. Easily one of the most polarizing records to come out that year, but also one of my personal favorites. For a lot of reasons. For its brutal honesty, for its dark humor, for its social commentary, its awkward vulnerability, as well as its appreciation for personal tragedy. But with that being said, I think Mr. Johnson's career thus far has been the trickiest of tightrope walks, considering just how boldly he flirts with being absolutely repellent, even in his brightest moments. Which makes me wonder how much of what he does is an attempt to orchestrate our perceptions of what he does. What I mean is, like, look at the man's discography thus far. With the titles of his records alone, he's literally describing what is happening to his career. With the rise of Hobo Johnson, he actually did rise with the viral spread of songs like Peach Scone. Then again, we have the fall of Hobo Johnson, which led to his image growing, more prolonged hate from music fans, his eventual departure from Reprise Records, and then some now recanted allegations that trended so hard and were so tumultuous, like they gained more attention than his music itself. I mean, all of this is about as much of a fall as we're gonna get in the 2 years since this LP dropped. And now he returns with the revenge of Hobo Johnson, which in a way does feel like revenge. On this record, Frank has completely given up any shred of likability or attempting likability. He's even stripped out some of the slight pop influences in his early work on this one, throwing out some of the beats, some of the sweeter sounds in the instrumentals, and opting more for just very chaotic, rickety acoustic cuts with these loud, large, annoying group vocals that are often calling and responding to his core lyrics on these songs. And those lyrics on this record dive even deeper into obnoxiousness, sometimes even tactlessness. With this I Want to See the World track that features some very weird comments about Martin Luther King dying, imperialism, Rwanda, the kind of self-centered observations that are anything but helpful, even if they are coming from a genuinely concerned place. Now, I would say this is the most offensive part of the record, but there are some other tracks that, like, you know, really come in hard. The cleverly titled Anton LaVey starts off endearing enough as an observation on death and being oblivious to having ended up in hell, but then it shifts into this weirdly detailed makeout session with Satan himself. Getting in the sheets, quite literally. There's like some swanky guitar bits in the background to make it sound, you know, sexy in kind of a humorous way, but like sexy nonetheless. And I guess I could appreciate the humor of it to a degree. It sounds like a funny part of a Rick and Morty episode or something. But it doesn't change that I'm still left here with the mental image of Hobo Johnson getting topped by Satan, and I'm just not really sure what to do with that. The track My Therapist undergoes one of the most tedious progressions that you could imagine, delivers these diatribes about worker ownership, voting rights, and look, his suggestions on this track are not off base. I mean, by no means do Hobo Johnson's politics seem all that bad, but a boring beat, bar chords, and unbearably whiny spoken word is like the worst way to deliver any of this stuff. There's also the prequel to Animal Farm, which points at injustice pretty boldly as well in our economic system, and kind of just paralleling that with characters and, you know, the story to the Animal Farm, you know, the Orwell book. It's a classic. I hope you've read it. But again, instrumental, cheap and rickety and awful and unappealing, vocals terrible. I mean, I suppose the writing is not all that bad, but the point Hobo is actually making here just kind of feels redundant. The issues of exploitation and authoritative control and oppression being brought up here, I mean, it's already kind of explained in Orwell's works themselves, trying to do a prequel here doesn't necessarily like, bring anything else to bear, in my mind. It's enough to make me wonder if this record is like a CIA psyop to convince people to not consider socialism or anything like along that path. I also kind of disagree with the premise of You Want a Baby, which, I mean, I get and I understand the concern of not wanting to have a child in this horrible world that we live in. The world is shit. People are horrible, but here's the fact of the matter. The world's always been trash. It's always looked like we've been doomed, and humans have always been trash as well. So I guess a response to that, combined with maybe like some personal issues of a lack of confidence, self-esteem, mental problems that you're dealing with, all of that coming together, this song comes to the conclusion that, hey, what's the point? Why have a kid? So on and so forth. Seems like it's maybe not so great of an idea. And while I understand that parenthood is not for everybody, parenthood should not be forced on people, but a lot of people have kids because they have hope for the future, hope that the next generation will help improve things, or that humanity will last long enough to fix itself, fix the world. I mean, maybe it won't, but certainly procreating is, I guess, a sign of, like some faith that it could happen, that it's possible, that there's potential. And, the inconsistency that I see with this track and this record overall is like, if that's kind of your attitude, if that's your feeling in a way, why say anything? We're doomed and we're fucked, whether or not you're like screaming at the top of your lungs about soap and the economy and exploitation. It's going to run its course whether you say anything or not. So, I mean, bleh. Now, keep in mind, that's not personally my opinion. I feel like we should be fighting with tooth and nail for things to be better. The only song on this LP that feels like it's even approaching likability is the track You Need Help, which is a pretty cool and entertaining commentary on depression, having medication for that, feeling like being trapped in between those two options is like a life sentence. But again, even if I think the lyrics and the choruses on this are somewhat well crafted, there's still a matter of how rickety the instrumentals sound, how annoying those boisterous group vocals are. Things get even more obnoxious on the 9th track, where Hobo's screaming and yelling is just so beyond being appealing in a musical way. I just don't really see it. I feel like this album is more just like personal and social commentary parading as a piece of music, because a lot of the time the music doesn't even really seem to take precedent. It doesn't really seem to take priority. It's really, if anything, more about what Hobo is saying and his attempts at poetry throughout this LP. And sometimes that can be kind of compelling. I think the very curious, intense descriptions of events on the song Jordan's House is certainly pretty enthralling. But still, even that track, with having some elements that I do like, is so far from feeling like the total package in terms of performance, composition, and production. And if the entire but very short track list wasn't torture enough to the very last drop, we have this outro track that just feels like an overly long sketch and piss take, where Hobo Johnson's talking about his haters and the critics through the voice of like a narrator, a voiceover actor, saying that his next album is going to be Hobo Johnson alienates his fan base. I mean, I guess I don't know what his fans are or who his fans are well enough to really say, but what is alienating his fan base if not this? I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that guess, or the potential for that, but I will say once again, to come around on the title here, this album does seem like revenge. It seems like revenge on anybody who ever dared to say Hobo Johnson's music was bad, and that it was terrible, and that it was unlikable, and that it was garbage, and that it was whiny. It feels like he's done here musically and lyrically everything that he could to make this record detestable to those who like his music the least. He actually made an album that sounds like how Hobo Johnson's music sounds like to people who hate all of Hobo Johnson's music, And as a result, even I can't stand it. Yeah, so because of that, this Hobo Johnson album, in my opinion, it's not good.